My name is Paul Nation, and I'm an emeritus professor at Victoria University of Wellington. Being an emeritus professor means that I don't get paid, but I don't have to do any work. So it's quite a good arrangement. Today I want to talk about the teacher's jobs. So if you're a teacher, what are the kinds of jobs that you must do, and which are the most important jobs? I'm going to describe 5 different jobs. I'll talk about each one, giving a little bit of explanation. I'll deal with the jobs in order, starting with what I consider to be the most important job of the language teacher, and then moving to what I think is the least important, but still important, job for a language teacher. The 5 jobs are these. The number 1 job of a language teacher is to plan and run a good language course. So this is the job of being a planner. The second job of a language teacher is to organize the learners to do activities so that everything runs smoothly and efficiently within the classroom. The third job of a language teacher is to train the learners how to learn. There are very important strategies that learners can learn so that they take control of their own learning and are not reliant on a teacher all the time. The fourth job of a language teacher is to test the learners, to see if they've learnt anything, to see where they are in their current knowledge, and to use testing to motivate them to do more learning. And the fifth job of a language teacher is to teach. Now, most people would think that the main job of a language teacher would be to teach. But if you accept the idea of the principle of the 4 strands, then teaching is really only a small part of 1/4 of a language course. And so teaching, meaning getting up and presenting information to the learners, is not a big part of a teacher's job. Now let's look at each of these 5 jobs in order. Planning and running a good language course. There are 2 major ways in which a teacher plans a good language course. The first way is to apply the principle of the 4 strands and to make sure that the course is providing an opportunity to learn through meaning-focused input, to learn through meaning-focused output, to learn through language-focused learning, and to learn through fluency development. I consider this to be the number 1 job that a teacher should do, to make sure that the language course is not missing out on opportunities for learning and providing a good balance of effective opportunities. Another part of planning is deciding what the learners need to learn. The language features of a language are not all of equal importance. If we take vocabulary as an example, some words are much more common and frequent than other words. And part of the planning that a teacher should do is to make sure that learners are focusing on the material which is the most useful for them at their present stage of proficiency. This includes vocabulary, grammatical features, and parts of discourse. In another video, we will look at the levels of vocabulary and how learners can move through these different levels. It's very important then that as a part of planning, a teacher should know what words their learners know and how many words they know so that the teacher can plan the next learning for them. It's also important that a teacher knows which grammatical features of the language are very frequent and therefore need to be used and will be met very often, so that the teacher can spend a bit more time on these features so that the learners get the best benefit for their learning. This kind of planning involves a principle which we call the cost-benefit principle. And the cost-benefit principle works like this. The cost is the amount of teaching and learning and effort required to learn something. The benefit is the number of opportunities that the learners get to meet and use the material that they've learnt. We need to make sure that at each stage of a learner's proficiency, the learners are getting the best benefit from the cost of learning. The second job of the language teacher is to organize the learners so that they know how to do the important activities which make up a language course. For example, part of the organizing activity of a teacher would be to get learners taking part in a good extensive reading program. With a little bit of training, the learners can learn how to choose the books that they should read, what they should do when they read the books, how to keep a record of their reading, and how to keep themselves motivated and doing lots of reading. Another kind of organizing activity that a teacher has to do is to organize pair work and group work, so that the learners can smoothly and quietly move into pair work, move into group work, move back to individual work. And the teacher really needs to set up routines in the classroom so that learners can move between these different kinds of learning opportunities smoothly and quietly without wasting a lot of time. The third job of a language teacher is training learners how to learn. Training learners how to learn involves the use of language learning strategies. If we look at vocab learning, there are 4 major vocabulary learning strategies that the teacher can train the learners to use. The most important strategy for vocabulary learning is guessing from context. And when teachers train learners in guessing from context, they become better at guessing. And then they're able to read without having to rush to the dictionary each time in order to find the meaning of an unknown word. A second very important vocabulary learning strategy is the strategy of word cards. Word cards involve the learners writing the word on a small card, only about this big, about that high and about that wide. And on one side they write the English word, and then on the other side they write the translation in their first language. Nowadays you can get apps which help them do this learning. For example, there are apps like iKnow, which apply good learning principles and help learners deal with vocabulary learning, deliberate vocabulary learning, using flashcards. Flashcard learning is very effective. And when learners learn vocabulary in this way, they can learn large numbers of words in a rather short time. But there are good ways of doing it and very inefficient ways of doing it. The third important vocabulary learning strategy is the strategy of word parts. Because English is made up of words which come from French, Latin, and Greek, many of the words in English have prefixes, suffixes, and stems. And there are some very, very frequent prefixes and suffixes and stems that learners can learn to help words stick in their memory. Some training in this strategy of learning the word parts and then applying them to help remember the meaning of a word is a very useful thing for teachers to do so that learners can remember vocabulary. A fourth strategy that helps with vocabulary learning is dictionary use. This means more than simply looking up the word in a dictionary. What it means is when you look up a word, you should also look at an example sentence which might be given containing the word. And you should look around the word to see if there are other words which share the same form as the word you are looking up. You can use these things which are in the dictionary to enrich your knowledge of a word when you look it up. So rather than just looking up the meaning, you're trying to elaborate on your knowledge of the word by using the information in the dictionary. There are other strategies that teachers can use and can train learners in their use so that they're able to use the language well. There is a very useful conversation strategy called question followed by short answer followed by extra information. And the strategy works like this. If someone says something to you, then you should respond with a short answer and then add extra information to the answer. So if they ask, "How long have you been here?" then you as a learner reply, 3 months. And that's your short answer. But you shouldn't stop there. You should give extra information. And then you can give extra information such as, "And I've enjoyed it the whole time I've been here." Or another piece of extra information might be, "It was actually very difficult for me when I first arrived." And then, of course, the person who's talking to you will have something to pick up on and respond to keep the conversation going. So this strategy of getting a question, giving a short answer, and then providing extra information is a very useful strategy for learners to use to get more spoken input and to keep a conversation going. There are other important strategies too, like controlling the speaker. Very early on, learners should learn sentences such as, "Could you say that again, please?" "Sorry, could you speak more slowly?" Or, "What did you mean by?" and that. And by using sentences such as this, you can gain some control as a learner over the input that comes to you, so that you can get people to speak more slowly, to repeat things and to explain things, so that you can genuinely engage in the conversation. Other important strategies that learners can be trained in include extensive reading, because being able to do extensive reading independently greatly increases the amount of input that a learner gets. Being able to use the internet well to gain resources for learning language is also an important strategy to help expand learning opportunities. So far, we've looked at the teacher's jobs of planning and running a good course. Number 2, organizing the learners. And number 3, training the learners in the use of helpful strategies to help take control of their own learning. The fourth job of a teacher is to test the learners. Whenever I go to look at a teacher's class, one of the first things I ask the teacher is, "How many words do your learners know?" Unfortunately, most teachers can't answer that question. But it's really easy to get an answer to that question, because there are now plenty of free vocabulary tests available which would allow a teacher to find out how many words roughly each learner knows. And this is very important when planning a course, because if learners already know a lot of words, but they can't use them, then the teacher should be making sure that they get plenty of fluency practice, meaning-focused input and meaning-focused output, so they can put this knowledge into practice. Testing also has other goals. Testing can help motivate learners, because if the test is coming up at the end of the week, this can be an encouragement to do work and study to prepare for the test. Tests can also measure learners' general proficiency, and teachers should know how to do this. The fifth job of a language teacher is to teach, and that is to help learners improve their pronunciation by focusing on particular sounds or particular syllables, by focusing on intonation and so on. Teaching by explaining the meaning of words and phrases. Teaching by explaining difficult grammatical points or pointing out interesting grammatical features in a piece of reading. All of this kind of teaching helps learning. We have now looked at 5 jobs that are really important for a language teacher to do. And I've put these jobs in order so that teachers can see where they should be directing most of their time. Because I put the job of planning first, then teachers should realize that the most important skill or job that they can do as a teacher is to make sure that the learners have a good balance of well-researched opportunities for learning. And that by far is the most important job. Teachers find it hard to believe that learners can learn without teaching. But in fact, most learning occurs without teachers doing deliberate things, explaining to the learners and so on. Most learning occurs incidentally or through the learners deliberately focusing on material. Teachers shouldn't overestimate the importance of teaching. The second major job of the teacher is to organize the learners. If the classroom runs smoothly and well, then time isn't wasted on things which don't involve language learning. And very early on in a language course, a teacher should get the learners well drilled in how to form groups, how to form pairs, what to do when individual work occurs, and how to do how to take part in an extensive reading program, how to do extensive listening by listening to a tape recorder, and so on. The fourth job of testing, teachers need to be aware of the tests which are available to help measure their learners' present knowledge and to measure their progress, and should have some very useful, easy to mark testing techniques that they can use to encourage the learners to study and to monitor their progress. Teachers should also be good teachers. And even though I have stressed the idea that teachers shouldn't do too much teaching, the teaching that teachers do can have a very strong effect on learning. It can explain things which are puzzling the learners. It can point out things which are important to them, but we mustn't overdo it. Are you a teacher who covers all these 5 jobs? If not, reflect on each job and see how that job works in your classroom and whether you need to rethink how much time you spend on each of the jobs that you do. Thank you very much.